IVM.
Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast by the Takshashila Institution. We are a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like bringing fresh perspectives to Indian affairs and Indian perspectives to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning into the All Things Policy podcast. My name is Rohan Pai. I'm an assistant program manager at the Takshashila Institution. And today I will be in conversation with Bharat Reddy, who is a program manager at the Takshashila Institution. Today we will be delving into the world of deepfakes. And I'm sure everyone has seen a deepfake by now, whether consciously or unconsciously on your phones, because they've taken the digital world by storm and they've spread on social media constantly and in an out of control fashion. And their latest victims have been even A-listers like Taylor Swift, Joe Biden, Sachin Tendulkar very recently. So it's been a huge problem trying to regulate the spread of deepfake content online, and world leaders everywhere have been racking their brains trying to arrive at a solution. So, in this podcast, we hope to discuss deepfake legislation and answer questions like: does the prohibition of deepfakes mean a clampdown on free expression? Or will the stricter legislation of deepfakes discourage innovation in the space of artificial intelligence? These are very difficult questions which don't have definite answers, but we hope to gain more clarity and understanding on them. So, I think I will start by turning the podcast over to Bharat. And I would like to know, Bharat, in your opinion, what a deepfake really is and how does the technology of deep synthesis media actually work?
Thanks, Rohan. Thanks for. I mean, it's a really important topic, and I'm happy to be having this discussion with you. So, deepfakes are a form of synthetic media where artificial intelligence is used to create fake audio, fake images or video, and it can be hard to distinguish it from the real content. Uh, and uh, and there are a lot of concerns being raised about how it could spread fake news. It could be used for fraud. It could be used to manipulate elections. And a lot of these concerns are real, and you've seen some of these playing out as well. So the term deepfake itself is a blend of two words, deep learning and fake. So that's where you get the word deepfake. And the way the technology works is that it uses artificial intelligence to analyze large data sets of, say, audio, photos, videos. And these algorithms, what they do is they digitally learn facial expressions, or lip movements, or voice, the way you modulate your voice, all of these things. And the learning allows it to know how the person naturally sounds, naturally looks when they're talking, and so on. Now, with this knowledge, then it can create new images, it can create voices, videos that mimic the original person and blend them seamlessly into other footage. For example, you are a musician and you might have played you have a video of a song that you played, right? Now, an AI tool can take my face and put it on a video of you performing, and it could seem like I'm doing, the performance. So, and that's maybe not a very malicious way to use this technology, but you can think of all the possibilities that could come out of something like this, right? Now, this is the problem here is that it's not all bad uses. So this is the same technology that A.R. Rahman, for example, recently used to recreate the voices of two late singers for a song that Rajnikant is going to star in. So you might see that the such technology is going to be is going to be having legitimate uses. It could be even used in photo or video editing tools that are there on your phone. So you see all of these positive use cases as well as some potential to misuse the technology. So that's where you have this debate about how do you govern this technology? How do you not stifle innovation and allow for I mean, stop the spread of all the bad use cases of this thing.
Yeah, I'm actually very glad that you brought up the positive use cases because when we see deepfakes or hear about deepfakes in the news, it always is equated with something malicious and something used to tarnish the reputation of other people. And that's also where deepfake legislation conversations stem from in how to regulate misinformation, how to protect people's identity. And this is a good segue, I think, to talk about deepfake legislation because it has been very difficult for countries to properly regulate the spread of deepfakes online because it's just difficult to detect whether something truly is a deepfake. Because since it has the power to fool people and fool audiences, it also is difficult for people regulating the deepfakes to know truly whether it's a deepfake or not. And the first country I think that I found which has the first ever comprehensive and nationwide policy on deepfake legislation was the People's Republic of China. And this is not surprising because, as we all know, China is no stranger to internet censorship. It is often dubbed as the Great Firewall of China. And it's interesting because even though China has such a robust internet censorship mechanism, it has struggled to monitor deepfakes alone just through detection mechanisms. So it has actually prompted a firm legislation from the government. And a new regulation which came out in 2022, not that new. It's just a document. It's a document issued by the Cyber Administration of China, Cyberspace Administration of China, and it is titled "The Provisions on the Administration of Deep Synthesis Internet-Based Information Services." Now, these regulations are very exhaustive, but a broad summary of them I will give it right now. One of the most important points these regulations state is that the companies or the deep synthesis providers have to get consent from individuals before making a deep fake of them. So, in this way, it would prevent, say, like Xi Jinping or other important leaders from getting their face used in something that is possibly fueling anti-regime sentiments, and it will keep the population in check and prevent protests or prevent misinformation. And another important point in this is that deep synthesis services, the providers will have to add a signature or a watermark on deepfakes, which will show that the work so that the video is not an authentic video, it's a deepfake video, and this will hopefully serve as a filtration mechanism to prevent misinformation from spreading very quickly. Um, it's important to note that while these regulations do seem quite stringent, it doesn't outright ban the use of deepfake technology, which is again, I think, can be explained by the fact that, as you said, there are many positive use cases of deepfakes. So banning them completely would hinder innovation in the space of artificial intelligence. Now that's China. But if we look at the United States of America, which is honestly, with regard to censorship, on the other extreme, because one of the most important parts of US governance is the First Amendment, which was enacted in 1791. And this amendment protects free speech, and it has done so in a way that has captured the imagination of so many Americans that it almost has become something of a cultural touchstone in US lawmaking. And that's the reason why it's been very difficult for legislation of deepfakes to pass in the United States because essentially it polices the spread of thoughts and ideas, and that value is enshrined in the Constitution, and it's very difficult to play around with that. But this is not to say that concerns of deepfakes are non-existent in the USA. But it must be noted that these concerns also crop up usually during only the election season, because in the USA, deepfakes are usually a concern when votes are a factor. And for example, a recent example of this is Joe Biden, whose voice was manipulated in a deepfake call. This was called a robocall. And in a sense, basically, many people got a phone call from an artificially generated voice that sounded like Joe Biden, and this voice urged Democrats not to vote in the New Hampshire primaries. So this is one of the main concerns of the USA. But however, it's very different from China because in China, the lot of the deepfake concerns are based on preventing anti-regime sentiments, and this is not the case in the USA because, as we all know, the politics in the USA has long been defined by political satire, by ad hominem attacks between candidates. Like politicians have been very freely criticizing each other, so it's not a case of anti-regime sentiment as such. Another example of this is the Florida governor Ron DeSantis. In his campaign video, this is in his official campaign video, he used artificial AI generated images of Donald Trump hugging Anthony Fauci. And these images aren't true. But he used that as a way of criticizing Donald Trump for supporting Anthony Fauci's beliefs during the COVID-19 pandemic. So deepfakes are very much fitting. They fit very neatly within the political climate of the USA. And that's why it's not surprising to find out that the actual legislations of deepfakes in the US are restricted to very few states. And even these legislations are very mild. For example, they only exist in 5 states so far: California, Texas, Michigan, Washington, and Minnesota. And even there, they are very much focused on AI deepfakes during election seasons and not year round, and only one state has it year round, which is Washington. And even these laws are very much related to disclosure, like in the case of China, where it needs to be made explicitly clear to the audiences that such a video was created using deepfake technology and is not authentic. So again, it's just a problem of curbing misinformation rather than banning the technology completely. But at the end of the day, I don't know if US laws will be very successful in curbing misinformation since they only apply to certain states. And we all know that internet access is available throughout the country. So it's very easy to escape these laws. I would like to turn the conversation back over to Bharat now because I want to understand if it is possible to automatically detect deepfakes when someone posts them online, because that seems to be the major problem, detecting whether a video is a deepfake technology video or an authentic video. What do you think?
Right, Ron. So it's really important, and it's so interesting to see the different approaches taken at the two ends of the spectrum, right? And when you look at, there is technology that's being developed that can detect deepfakes, but um, as the deepfake technology itself becomes more sophisticated, detecting these things becomes even more harder. So, for example, some of the characteristics that could be used to detect deepfakes are one simple thing could be the metadata of the image or the video that's been generated. So you could look at things like the timestamp or the details about the device that it was recorded on. And if there are any inconsistencies that could indicate that there's been some kind of a manipulation and it's not an authentic video or a image or whatever. Uh, but then there are also other details that you can look at in the image itself or in the video that is there. Things like the texture of the skin or the rendering of the facial hair on the person or the frequency with which they're blinking, the whether the voice matches the lips movement, whether that is in sync, and if that person is wearing glasses, the reflection that you can see on the glasses. Details like this are usually the ones which are not very well rendered when you create these deepfakes. But these are, again, as the technology itself gets more sophisticated, it'll be harder to use these details to say that it's a fake, right? So for now, maybe these serve as good markers to differentiate the original from the fake, but it might not be for very long. Now, when you're talking about automatically detecting it on different platforms, there are some concerns that you can think of here. So, if there's a mandate that all social media platforms are supposed to, detect any kind of deepfake that's on their platform, there will be challenges that these platforms will face. So, maybe the bigger platforms which have a lot of data to train their algorithms, which have a lot of expertise in building such algorithms, which might be able to develop algorithms which might perform reasonably well. So they might be able to screen a lot of the content and identify it in most cases, right? But a smaller organization without that expertise might find it more challenging to deal with, to comply with these regulations. So there will be these barriers to entry which might be created, and the bigger platforms might get a advantage because of all the tech that's already been built, because of the expertise that they have, and they might be able to comply with these kind of regulations easily. There are other things also that, for example, um, the bigger problem here is it's not just that there is a um, problem with the content being fake or real, but a deeper problem is that people tend to believe things that people have a confirmation bias, and people tend to believe things that aligns with their own beliefs. So if that's something that they resonate with, they're likely to believe that. If it's something that they believe, then they're likely to spread it. So it's part of a bigger picture, and so it might not be as simple as detecting it and stopping it on a platform, right? So um, and if again there's a lot of other things, like if it's on a platform that's end-to-end encrypted and you share it from one person to another, you don't really have the means to intercept it and see whether it's been manipulated. I mean, whether it's a fake or an original. So there are a lot of these concerns. So it's not as simple as mandating the platforms to not have any kind of deep fakes that are on the platform itself. So yeah.
Stay tuned to All Things Policy. We'll be right back after a short commercial break.
Great point you made about bigger social media companies generally gaining an advantage if the companies are the ones who have the responsibility of regulating the content. And this could put many smaller companies and up and coming companies underground for this reason, if governments basically shift responsibility of deepfake regulation from themselves onto the companies. And it's great that you brought it up, because that's exactly what's happening in India at the moment. On 26th December last year, the social media giants like Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Google, all of the famous ones, they were issued a stern advisory by the union government, which said that content created using deepfake technology cannot be hosted on their platforms. And the way that they can regulate this is by making it explicitly clear to their users that such content would go against the rules of the platform and could land them in jail with a criminal offense. And this was there were like regulations, like it had to be mentioned to the users multiple times with constant reminders, such as when they log on, before they post something, so it would be amply clear to users. This was what the advisory said. And it doesn't include only deepfake content, it includes content that violates certain conditions listed under Rule 3.1b of the IT rules published under the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology. So, as I said, this advisory basically shifts the responsibility of deepfake legislation from the government onto the markets, or from the sarkar onto the bazaar. So rather than the actual perpetrators of deepfakes, the people who actually create them, they are not at risk, but it is rather the intermediaries, the social media companies, the platforms, the distributors. They face the risk of suspension, because if they are found hosting content that that can be classified as deepfake technology, they have the risk of being banned in India, of being blocked, just like how TikTok was. So they lose access to the very lucrative Indian market with a billion potential users. So it's up to them to mandate and to regulate deepfake technology. And That's what the Union Minister Rajiv Chandrasekhar said in a statement. And he also said that there has been a very mixed performance of compliance regarding this advisory since December 26th. So he says that if the advisory is not being followed through completely, the government will follow it up with a very clear and amended IT rules, because currently the IT rules have not been updated for a long time. There have been several drafts, but it's not been issued um, as issued clearly and definitively as new IT rules. So that's what will happen soon. That is what they've been saying for the last few weeks. It is only a matter of time before deepfake technology in India will definitely face a reduction, and it is something that will affect all of us. So, I want to ask you, Bharat, do you think this hardline approach by India will work, or or perhaps is it not hardline enough? Should they be more gentle? Should they be more stringent? And if there are any unintended consequences that will arise as a result of this decision, that would also be great to talk about. Yeah.
Right. So, like you're saying, right? I don't know if there's one measure that could deal with this problem. Like asking the platforms not to have deep fakes on the platform itself might not be a very feasible uh, measure, because it might get increasingly hard to detect this kind of content, and at the rate at which people are sharing them, detecting. I mean, going through every image, every video that's shared, it takes a lot of computational power, right? So again, it's an advantage to larger platforms which might be able to afford that infrastructure. So I don't know if it's really. It might be something that platforms are expected to do, but the mandate that there will be a penalty imposed, that you might not be able to operate in this country if you do not comply with this, or if there's any instance of deepfake content that's found on the platform. So that might be a very drastic step to take, and it might not really achieve the intended outcome. So what I think is that there needs to be a multi-pronged approach. This could be one of them, that platforms are expected to make a best effort to minimize the kind of the deep fakes that are on the platform. Other than that, you can also see that tools that are used to generate deep fakes have some form of a watermark or a label, something similar to what was in the Chinese way of approaching this as well. They might also It might also need penalties for someone who is caught creating such content. That will be again a deterrent for someone to create these things. And you'll also need tools which are better at detecting the deep fakes. So that's an area which the government should probably incentivize research in. There might be grants that could be made available so that people can actually build these tools, or and build them as in a way that could be accessible to a larger public. I think the MIT research lab was working on one such tool which was available to the public. And largely, I think it's a bigger part of a bigger problem, like we were just discussing. And to deal with that, you need to spread awareness to improve media and information literacy. So people need to know that the content that they get on their phones or on their digital devices is not always reliable, and they should have that. They should view it critically, and they should be able to verify it if they feel that there is some uh, you know uh, they don't something that they don't trust, or that could be manipulated. They should be able to have um, the they should have the um, awareness to be able to sense that, and then to go and find out if that's really authentic before they spread it to in the network. So it's a bunch of measures that are required to deal with it, from starting from where it's originating to where it's being consumed. We might have to do different things along that entire process so that you can tackle this effectively. So it's not just one approach, one thing that can deal with it, is what I think.
Yeah, I do agree with you about the fact that taking stricter action against people who are guilty of creating deepfakes will serve as a deterrent. And this reminds me of recently an actress in India, Rashmika Mandana. The person who created deepfakes of her was arrested in Delhi. And this came as a huge shock to me because I mean, that's actually what prompted me to research further into this and use this for a podcast topic. So I do think a hardline approach like what India is doing, such as threatening social media companies and arresting deepfake creators, does have its advantages. But I think it also has a lot of unintended consequences because, for example, if deepfakes are legitimized as a criminal offense in India, it can be used as a scapegoat for a lot of corrupt politicians. Like, for example, if a video is leaked of a politician engaging in an illicit activity or a corrupt activity, the politician can make a reasonable claim that this video was created using deepfake technology. That is not me. My face was used without my consent, and it would be a legitimate allegation to make. It would be very hard to disprove such an allegation if deepfake legislation does reach the level that it is that it seems to be reaching with regard to Indian legislation. That's one consequence I could think of. Another one is similar to what we talked about in the beginning of the podcast, where the positive use cases of deepfakes will be pushed to the sidelines, and the innovation in the space of artificial intelligence could be hampered if deepfake technology on its own is classified as a criminal offense, because deepfake technology has a lot of positive use cases. For example, I can list a few examples right now. One that I found recently was the Dali Museum in St. Petersburg, Florida, created an exhibition called Dali Lives. And basically, it brought him back to life using deepfakes. And visitors who visited the museum could take a selfie and interact with Salvador Dali. And this is a great mechanism and a great tool to make learning more fun in the classroom and to bring historical interest back. Another positive use case of this is lip syncing deepfakes, which enables speakers to communicate multiple languages. And an example of this is David Beckham partnered with a health charity and produced a voice campaign to help end malaria. It was called Malaria No More campaign. And in this campaign, he spoke 9 languages. So it's very visible that deepfake technology used for positive cases like this does a great job of spreading messages further and amplifying positive messages. Of course, it could also amplify negative messages, but that's just the double-edged sword that deepfakes and that any form of new technology is. Another positive use case, this is the last one, I promise, is it can be used to provide help human rights activists and journalists anonymity. So we see that many of these human rights activists and journalists report from war-torn regions, from areas with dictatorial and oppressive regimes. So using deepfake technology, it can help them to spread information and report from the ground without it posing a risk to their personal safety and giving them privacy. So all of these would be compromised if deepfake technology on its own was classified as criminal offense. So I do think that a gentler approach may be just addressing the negative connotations of AI, the negative connotations of deepfakes, and the negative ways in which it's used, such as for misinformation purposes. If that is narrowed in on and focused on, it would be a more logical approach that would basically prevent these unintended consequences from arising. So I think this is also a great way to segue into the conclusion, which is I want to ask you, Bharat, if you think deepfakes are truly a cause for concern, or if these fears that are talked about on the news every day now are just similar to those that accompany any new technology. Are deepfakes the problem, or should we focus on solving the root problem of misinformation?
No, I think there is a real concern with deepfakes as well, because the scale at which they'll be able to be created and they can spread misinformation it'll be hard to deal with that thing. And then for consumers, it'll be a loss of trust in what they're consuming, right? So they won't know what is true and what is not, and it might lead to a general deterioration in the trust itself in media. So and again, technology might provide some of the answers in that it can be used to detect some of this content, and you might end up relying on it. Might help journalists to deal with the scale problem. You might be able to use technology to deal with the scale that the problem presents, and you'll have trained journalists who will be able to use these tools, augment the tools with their skills, and be able to address some of these things, and provide a counter narrative to what's being presented, right? So it is a real concern, and I think you'll need a lot of different approaches to deal with it, some of which are technological, some of which are regulatory, some of which are problems in educating people, and a lot of these things have to come together to address the problem.
Yeah. Well, this has been a very enlightening and insightful conversation. Thank you for joining me on this episode, Tara. It's been a pleasure. And thank you all for listening to this episode of the All Things Policy podcast. Stay tuned for more.
If you liked our show, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can tune into them on the IVM Podcast app, ivmpodcast.com, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also follow IVM on social media. The handle is @IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And hey, if you'd like to dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs, check us out at our Twitter handle @TakshashilaINST or our website takshashila.org.in.